Alright guys, today is the 1 year anniversary of the PlayStation VR2 that's sitting right here next to me. And I wanted to talk about it with you guys because there's been a lot of talk, of the PlayStation VR2. Has Sony given up on it? Is Sony even doing anything with it? There's no games in the library. Other people say there is games in the library. All that kinds of stuff. And I wanted to come at this video from someone who actually has been using VR for a very long time, has had the PlayStation VR2 since day one, but also has other headsets as well. I got the Oculus Quest 3 right next to me. I have the big screen beyond for my PC. I have the Apple Vision Pro, and I've had a lot of other headsets in the past, like the HTC Vive Original, the Pro, the Valve Index, and all this kinds of stuff. So I have a lot of experience about, these VR headsets, and I wanted to talk about why I don't use mine as often, or why I use it for specific things, what I think about the game library, what Sony can do to improve in the future. Do we got to throw it in the garbage? All those kinds of things that people are kind of talking about out there, we want to talk about in this video. So let's go ahead and get into the video.
Gaming tech, eating brekkie is the gaming tech. Going for a brekkie is the gaming tech. Gaming tech is the gaming tech. Gaming techie.
Alright guys, so let's start with the PlayStation VR2 and let's talk about the thing that everyone always talks about with the PlayStation VR2, and that is the game library. Now, I don't actually fall in line with what everyone else kind of says, or not everyone else, but a lot of people always say there's nothing to play on the PlayStation VR2, the library is trash, there's nothing good in it. Not true at all. It kind of depends on where you're coming from. If the PlayStation VR2 is the only headset that you have because you have a PlayStation 5 and that is the VR headset of choice, which is where you should get if you have a PlayStation 5, then the PlayStation VR2 library is amazing because there's over 170 games already. We've got over 170 games on year one. That's a game every other day. I mean, that's nothing to complain about. And obviously not every game is good. There's been a lot of games that weren't good. But you can't sit here and tell me that you can't find at least, and I'm just throwing a random number out there, 25 games that are really good on the PlayStation 5 library just right off the bat. Because I've made top lists on the PlayStation VR, and I know I can very easily. Now, the problem is that some people come at it with the idea of, like me, where they also have another headset, and they're like, hey, I got a Meta Quest 3, or I got a PC VR headset, and a lot of these games I've already played before, or they're coming from other libraries. And if you fall into that camp, and you have other headsets, then sure. But you already knew that when you bought it. You knew that when you got the PlayStation VR 2, you're probably only going to be using it for the exclusives or things that may run better on it and things like that. But even then, and I fall into that same camp, I don't play every game on the PlayStation VR 2. It just depends because I have a PC VR headset as well. So if Arizona Sunshine 2 is going to look better on the PC, unless if something stands out on the PlayStation VR 2, I'm going to go play it on the PC with my big screen beyond. And that's obvious. But a lot of people keep making it seem like that means there's nothing in the games library. No, I mean, you bought the PlayStation VR 2 willingly knowing that obviously you have another headset that has a lot of these games that are obviously going to be multi-platform. That's the nature of what this thing is. You're not going to have an exclusive every 2 days on the PlayStation VR 2. There's obviously going to be games that are on other platforms that are going to be ported because devs want to make the most amount of money, and they're going to be porting their games from everywhere. There's no problem with that, and we all want that. So sure, I only come to the PlayStation VR 2 for specific games, but there's still a lot of games. Take the exclusives out of the picture. Let's say that you were only going to buy this thing for exclusives like me. There's still games that I choose to play on the PlayStation VR 2 that are just better on the PlayStation VR 2 for one reason or another that it just makes it more fun. Give you an example. Star Wars Galaxy's Edge is a game that's not available on PC. It was only a Quest exclusive, but when they brought it over to the PlayStation VR 2, not only is it more detailed with better graphics, because obviously there's more horsepower on the PlayStation VR 2, but the haptics that you get with the controllers and stuff and the headset rumble makes the experience that much better, and the adaptive triggers, it makes that package so much better. I stopped playing Galaxy's Edge on the Quest 3. I'd rather play it on the PlayStation VR 2. That's a multi-platform game, because it's on 2 platforms, but I'm going to choose the PlayStation VR 2 every single time. And that's not the only example of that. Racket Fury, the table tennis game that's on there, that game also exists on the PC VR platform. It also exists on the Quest platform, but I'm going to choose to play it on the PlayStation VR 2 platform every single time. Why would I do that? Well, because the graphics are really good. It's smooth at 120 hertz, just like the PC VR version, so they're equal in that. But on the PlayStation VR 2 version, the haptic controllers with these controllers, which really is a selling point of a lot of things with the PlayStation VR 2. I think they did a fantastic job with these controllers. that when you're actually playing it, you feel the ball every single time that you hit the ball, and it just has a satisfying like clunk that the ball is hitting your hand, that it adds to the experience enough that I'd rather play the game on the PlayStation VR 2 because of that reason. And you may not think that that's a big deal, but for a game like ping pong, that is a big deal. And why would I play it on another platform if there's a better version out there? So there's a lot of instances where multi-platform games can be better on the PlayStation VR 2 than their counterparts. No Man's Sky, a game that's really huge on PC VR, doesn't exist on the Quest, but is on PC. So many people on the PC platform say that PlayStation VR 2 has the better version after they did the latest updates because it looks really sharp, it has the foveated rendering, it has the haptic controllers again, it has the adaptive triggers. So you can't just look at the exclusives. Sometimes the games that are multi-platform may also be better on the PlayStation VR 2. So I'm lucky to be able to have all these headsets, test it out and see which one I want to play it on, and sometimes it's the PlayStation VR 2. So it's not just about the exclusives. So in my opinion, the game library is a lot better than people give it credit for. Whether you're coming in here as this being your only headset, then you have a crap ton of games to get through. So many good games out there, that people have been enjoying for a while on other platforms, and now we're on the PlayStation VR 2, on top of all the exclusives. And even if you're not somebody who's coming in here for as a brand new person, I still think there's a lot of great games that either play better or are exclusives on the PlayStation VR 2. Even if you're coming out here from a multi-platform person like me who has multiple headsets. Let's talk about the next thing people always talk about with the fact that like Sony doesn't have any exclusives on this thing. Let me tell you guys, for the first year of a headset, I really can't complain. Gran Turismo is a game I would have bought the PlayStation VR 2 for just in and of itself. I believe I literally got a wheel setup that I've showed in this video just for that game. Of course, I use it for other games now, but the idea was I bought it for that specific game because of how immersive it was to use a wheel and be sitting in a chair playing that game in VR, and it still is to this day, and that's a full-on game. And I hate the nonsense that people say, and they try to say, oh, but Gran Turismo and Resident Evil, they're games that you can play on 2D flat screen, so that doesn't count. In what world does that mean it doesn't count? That's literally what we want. We want games that if you, obviously, not every game is going to be built for the ground up for VR, even though some of those games deserve to, because there's a lot of games that should be built up from the ground up for VR, because there's a lot of things you can do in VR that you can't do on the flat screen that wouldn't be fun. But that doesn't mean that we can't do games that are hybrid. I would love to play The Last of Us in a hybrid factor. Let everyone play it in 2D, but let those devs also add it in VR. That would let a lot more games come into VR, and it's still a lot of fun to play. Look at all the people who are talking about the mods that are on PC VR right now because of, different mods that are out there, like the UE4 mod that people talk about, that you can play all of these games now in PC VR, and people are going crazy for how good it looks. Why? Because it doesn't matter if the game was in 2D. It's also a game that you can play in VR, and in some cases, they're better to play in VR and they're more immersive that way. So that whole stigmatism of being like, oh, because the game is in 2D, it just doesn't count as a game on PlayStation VR is complete nonsense. Because if it was me, I'd want a hybrid strategy. I want games that are built in 2D to also come to PlayStation VR 2, so we can get a lot more games, and that doesn't make that game any less more fun. Even if I'm playing with the DualSense controller, some of the best games out there you can play with the controller. So I think that's kind of nonsense. There's so many good exclusives on here besides that. There's Gran Turismo, like I said. There's both Resident Evil games that are on here. Horizon is a lot better than people give it credit for, especially for a launch title that came out with that game. There's other games that Sony has specifically funded to bring on here that are exclusives, like Synapse, which even though it's a short game, is still a fantastic experience to play on here. Song in Smoke is a game that was funded by Sony to bring over here, and is a version that doesn't exist elsewhere. So there are still plenty of games that only exist on here. There's Switchback, which is one of my favorite, games on here because I love horror games, especially after they updated it and things look fantastic in that game now. And they added like, a horde mode type of thing where you actually get into the action a lot faster. So they're doing some good stuff on there too. There's a lot of good games on here that people don't give it credit for. People just glance over for no reason at all. So the fact that there's like 6, 7 exclusive games or that right off the bat are sitting on the PlayStation VR 2 from year one is a perfectly good, perfectly good number in my opinion to have. And yes, they're not all from first party Sony, which we all want more of, but they're still exclusive regardless. And that doesn't even count all the games I talked about before that just run better on the PlayStation VR 2. Now, having said everything I just said, that doesn't mean everything is roses on the PlayStation VR 2. That doesn't mean Sony is doing everything right by any stretch of the imagination. Sony still does a terrible job at marketing the PlayStation VR 2. They hardly ever talk about it when they do. It's always like usually games that no one really cares about. They're not really telling us what's coming. Does that mean that Sony doesn't have anything coming from first party or that they're not funding other games? Obviously, we don't know for sure. I'd be surprised if they're not funding other games. I don't know if they have a first party game coming, but I think it's completely ridiculous that even if they're not funding new first-party games for the PlayStation VR 2 platform, that they either A, not working on the hybrid strategy I talked about, or B, bringing over some of the exclusives that we had, like Blood and Truth, like Astrobot, and all these other great games that we had, like Wipeout on the original PlayStation VR 1, and bringing them over to the PlayStation VR 2. Sure, you need to do some work. The control methods weren't the same. It's not just a press C to copy and bring it over, but it's worth the effort. You're going to have a lot of people buy that game all over again because there's a lot of new people on the PlayStation VR 2, and those games were amazing and they need to be kept for people to experience it. And it doesn't seem like Sony's doing that. I mean, after year one, we haven't got any announcement. I don't know how that haven't announced like, hey guys, Astrobot, you know, we don't have a sequel yet, but we're bringing the original back for you guys with updated visuals so you can get them in 4K and, you know, blah, 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 whatever the case may be. And so many people would eat that stuff up. I would. So Sony's not doing a good job with that. They're not doing a good job with backwards compatibility, which they never have, to be fair, with any of their stuff, whether it's 2D or in VR. And they definitely need to do a better job. They need to do, if they had one game a quarter to basically hype us up and be like, hey, either we're funding this game, or either it's a first-party exclusive, or we're bringing back a game from the original PlayStation, and did that once a year, or sorry, once a quarter, so we get 4 of those types of things. Or it's a hybrid strategy, 4 of those a year. So many people would be happy, because then we got those 4 games on top of all the third-party developers making games for the PlayStation VR 2 on top of it. But Sony doesn't either. I don't know what their reasoning is. They're not doing a great job in the 2D space either, as far as keeping people excited about what's coming next. So this is a problem at Sony at large, but they definitely need to fix it, and they would go a long way, you know, to have that fixed. And of course, it's the price of the PlayStation VR 2. Now, I don't really fall into the camp that like, oh, because it's more expensive, that means I'm not going to buy it than it is of the console. I think the hardware and the controllers make sense for a $550 product. They're not meta. They're not going to be able to subsidize the cost for all of this stuff like you would want them to. It's unfortunately how it's going to work. They can't do that. But I can't wait to see them drop the price to like $450 or $400 to get a lot more people in the door when that price keeps coming down, because a lot of people do look at that price and they say, oh, it's more expensive than the console. I'm not buying that because it's an accessory. I don't fall into that camp. I don't look at things like that. I think I look at it like, hey, is this going to be fun? Is this going to add value? Am I going to have a fun time with this? It doesn't matter that it costs more than the console that it's putting on. It just depends on what the console is, or what the games are going to be, if I'm going to have fun with it and stuff like that. Now, with the final thoughts that I have about the PlayStation VR 2 is how I use it and what I think about going forward. So you guys know I use a lot of headsets. So for me, the PlayStation VR 2 is where I play obviously the exclusives every single time. Obviously the games that run better. Every time there's a game that's multi-platform on all the consoles, I research, look it up, or get codes for multiple of them and see which one I want to play it on and see which review I want to do it on. And that's the version that I play, whether it's a PlayStation VR 2 or big screen or the Quest. It just depends on where those games are going to be. But those controllers that come with the PlayStation VR 2 really are a selling point. They really are the best controllers in VR. They did a fantastic job with that. I wish I could use those controllers on every VR headset. They're better than the Index controllers. They're better than the Oculus controllers. And they really do add to the immersion of these games. But if the game is multi-platform and there's nothing exclusive about the PlayStation VR 2, or it's not better on the PlayStation VR 2 and it's better on the PC, then of course I'll play it on the PC. And if it's better on the Quest, then I'm going to play it on the Quest. That's very obvious. So I pick and choose where my games go, and I'm in the luxury to be able to have that with multiple headsets. But I think most people who are just pick up a PlayStation VR 2, who have never experienced VR or don't have another headset, are going to be really happy with the library, because there's a lot there for people to dive into. The people who are coming from another platform, like who have a Quest already, obviously things may be a little bit different. It depends on, you have to have your expectations in check on what you're actually getting here, like I have. But there's also the fact that they just recently announced and now we're going to get PC support. So that's obviously awesome that we're going to be able to finally either stream PC VR games to the PlayStation, or it's going to be connected directly. We don't know yet. They haven't announced. It's coming later this year, but that was a crazy announcement from them. You know, that's something that people have been asking them to do. So it's cool to see that they're actually going to do it. And see if that helps sell more headsets and stuff like that. It's not something I really care about, because I already have a PC VR headset that is better because of Big Screen Beyond with the OLED panels and pancake lenses. But, you know, Obviously, some people are going to like it because sometimes it's their only headset that they're going to use. So we'll see how that actually helps things going forward. But as far as the future goes, I hope that they do the stuff I talked about with, announcing the games better, bringing the cadence of new games like once a quarter, like I talked about. And, I'd love to see a mid-gen refresh. I'd love to see them come out with, like, they don't need to change the whole entire headset. They don't need to change the controllers. Literally, all they need to do to make me a lot happier is change these Fresnel lenses to pancake lenses. Make this headset cheaper, make it $300-400, whatever it needs to be. Make another headset in its place that's now $550 or whatever. Put pancake lenses in there and make the OLED panels a little bit better, because the mirror on them is one of the things that I hate. That shows up in more games than others. It's not always an issue. It depends on the game, but when it is an issue, it's definitely annoying because I'm used to the pancake lenses on the Quest, which are superior. They're not OLED, but they're still superior in clarity. And then I have the big screen beyond that does use OLEDs, and there's no mirror on that at all. I have the Apple Vision Pro that also has no mirror at all and also uses OLED panels. Now, granted, can't compare it to an Apple Vision Pro that costs $4,000, but and even the big screen is obviously $1,000. But I do think that they can get OLED panels in here that don't have that mirror problem, that they can fix it with pancake lenses at a certain price point that we can hit and make this one cheaper and have like a mid-gen refresh and keep everything else the same. I'd buy that immediately, because those two things would change the game for the PlayStation VR2 with a better clarity of pancake lenses and also just the OLED panels in general. So overall, guys, in my opinion, the PlayStation VR2 has had a pretty good year on year one, but there's a lot to improve in year two if they want to see this platform grow. They can't just let the third-party developers just keep bringing their games and they don't do anything else on the side. PC VR support is a great first step, but they need to, have their strategy of bringing 2D games also into the hybrid strategy model. They need to bring, some of their first-party games, make some first-party VR exclusives like they used to do on the VR1. They need to also bring some of their games over from VR1 to PlayStation VR2 to make a lot of people happy. There's a lot that they can do, and they need to advertise this thing better. And I don't know, hopefully that's something that they do in year two. We'll see how that goes, obviously. And, but there's still some exciting stuff coming on the platform. The new Metro game is coming. There's some stuff that they announced here recently that's coming that we're all excited about. And, we'll see what happens with the platform going forward. I'm definitely haven't given up on the PlayStation VR 2. It's definitely not going in the garbage, and it definitely don't think it belongs there. There's still a lot of good stuff on here, and I'm excited to see the future of it. And I love the controllers of this thing. That's what makes me keep coming back. So hopefully we have a good year ahead of us. We'll see how it progresses. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video on the, state of the PlayStation VR 2 in my mind. And thank you guys for watching. Till next time.